What do you think this is? A locker room? A phone booth? Or maybe...
Listen, buddy, I'm in a hurry here. Let's try for a twofer.
But no, this is a karaoke in China. 2 square meters where you won't bother anyone. And these are the apartments being sold on the outskirts of major cities. More and more of these apartments are being built, and the average family size has halved in the last 60 years. The atomization of society, along with the aging of the world's population, is now making hundreds of millions of people around the world loners. The epidemic of loneliness is making big corporations a lot of money. But in doing so, they're digging a hole into which they will fall. How is it that loneliness has taken over the planet? And why is it good for business? Well, at least for now. Let's find out. If 100 years ago, living alone was associated with family misfortune, the loss of a breadwinner, orphanhood, deprivation, and suffering, the modern trend that has been called the epidemic of loneliness is primarily associated with the general growth and wealth of the world. Loneliness takes many forms. While you're young and active, you seek fulfillment, build a career, and live for yourself. You have a lot of things to do, a sea of friends and acquaintances. So often there is only one desire: to lie down in an empty room and sleep for 10 or better 12 hours so that no one touches you. But everything changes with age. The loneliness of the elderly is more often forced than voluntary. Did you know that the retired make more than half of the lonely people in the U.S.? Loneliness is the modern scourge of the world at large. In the U.S., the proportion of singles has more than doubled from 13% in 1960 to 28% in 2015. In major European economies such as Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, it is more than 30%, also doubling or more over the same period. The share of singles is also growing in many middle and low-income countries. The trend is developing almost everywhere, albeit at different rates and scales. In Mexico, for example, only 10% of families consist of a single person, but half a century earlier, there were almost 2.5 times fewer such families, 4%. And in Angola, a similar increase in the share of singles from 4% to 10% took just 1 decade, from 2007 to 2016. In Japan, there is even an incredible phenomenon called kadokashi, when people die alone in their homes and their bodies are found days later. Even in patriarchal Italy, famous for its close family ties, 30% of citizens live alone. And in Sweden and Estonia, only half the population has a partner. Here's the story of how societies have become strangers to one another. In the mid-20th century, 2/3 of the world's population lived in villages. But as industrialization accelerated, the trend changed. Today, more than 4 billion people live in cities. High population densities in megacities make it possible to produce more goods and services at lower costs, greatly improving the quality of life. As a result, young people are leaving the periphery for the cities, where they are trying to succeed. The fierce competition for resources in all areas stimulates the growth of prices, especially for housing. A middle-aged young man in a large city is more concerned with providing for himself, renting or buying a decent apartment, and generally enjoying life. Of course, there is no time for such a person to build trusting, deep relationships and anything more or less social. The second reason for mass loneliness is demographic change. Already today, there are more elderly people than children in the world, and by 2040, half the people on the planet will be over 50. This is despite the fact that the world's population has tripled in the last half-century. The average family size always increases after economic crisis, but the overall dynamic is still negative. In part, this is because women continue to choose careers over family. And while in the mid-1950s, the average woman on the planet gave birth to 5 children, today it is 2. This suggests that the trend towards singleness is voluntary rather than forced, and it's being encouraged by the development of technology. With the growth of cities, the proportion of people who can afford to live alone has increased greatly. In developed countries, the level of services and social security is higher, so it is possible to live alone even in 15 square meters. And social networks help to maintain superficial ties and isolate oneself from society. People not only watch streamers playing games, but also eat with their idols and even sleep with the broadcast on. There's no need to go anywhere to make friends. Social isolation has reached the point where bloggers and celebrities themselves broadcasting their digital avatars instead. So for many people, friends are replaced by animals. The more loners there are in the world, the higher the demand for cats, dogs, and even fish. More than half of dog owners in the UK say pets help them cope with feelings of abandonment and build new relationships. Companies are trying to fill this niche by releasing companion robots. But if animal substitutes are still in short supply, the devaluation of relationships through dating apps is in full swing. Today, mobile dating is used by 10 to 20% of the population in developed countries. The audience is growing, but despite the fact that there are more dating opportunities, there are fewer strong relationships. The first reason is the change from social morality to individual morality. Self-development and self-discovery are now at the forefront. When you're all self-aware, it takes years to find the perfect partner because there are no perfect people. The second reason is the illusion of endless choice in a dating app. It reduces the chances of finding your man to zero because it always seems that the next one will be better. Of course, it is disadvantageous for the services if people find a couple and delete the app. It is much better if singles constantly look for new partners and renew their paid subscription. What can we say? The profits of love apps are steadily growing every year. Paradoxically, this is a good thing for the modern economy. People buy more and spend more. Companies make more money and, in turn, spend more. Money flows to the most promising areas, and competition for consumers drives technological development. But in the wave of rapid digitization, people have changed their lifestyle so rapidly over the past 100 years that it has created huge personal problems. The number of mental disorders increases every year. And the reason that official statistics show a higher proportion of women among psychologist clients is not because they suffer more than men, but because men are not used to sharing their problems. Cynics say that the increase in visits to psychologists and psychiatrists is due to the economic boom. More money is being spent on doctors and medicine in general. However, the long-term effects of loneliness are extremely negative. Singles are less protected in old age, which means that the government will have to spend more money on social services. Today, the global economy spends up to 1/10 of the world's GDP on healthcare, and the amount is increasing every year. Lonely people tend to be less productive. If your team lacks close friendships, you will underperform your competitors. The same can be said at the macro level. Countries with strong individualism have fewer economic prospects because breakthrough technologies and innovations are impossible without close cooperation. After all, singles spend more on rent and consume more electricity. They are more likely to make impulse purchases, and even in the stock market, they take more risk than people with families. And there's an assumption that singles do not spend less on Valentine's Day than people in couples because the inferiority imposed by society has to be compensated by something. And all the movie-going, gift-buying, and other consumption is competently stimulated by marketers. At the same time, loneliness is economically unprofitable. Living in a family reduces the expenses of each other compared to living alone. But it seems that the time when a person needed another person to live is gradually passing. In today's world, personal freedom is much more valued without material wealth, and such values as friendships and love seem to have taken a back seat. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.